Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion topic video. In this one I want to talk about the 5-year anniversary of the ending of Legend of Korra. Technically it was yesterday, but obviously Rise of Skywalker, that's when I did my review for it. But either way, we're talking about it the day afterwards. December 19th, 2014 was when Korra came to an end, and we're obviously the day after that, 5 years later here. December 20th, 2019. So, yeah, 5 years ago is when Korra ended. That's really crazy to think about. It doesn't kind of feel that way because it's not like the franchise has been like dead for the last 5 years. Not like we've had the comics, we recently had the novels, and then there's been like obviously merchandise stuff happening, especially more recently, and probably like especially like around now as we sort of transition into 2020. It feels like there's kind of almost this like comeback on the horizon, in that like obviously the Netflix kind of thing is kind of probably we're going to see stuff about it next year, and with the bigger merchandise push than we've seen in a long time, it feels like there's kind of something going on here. But yeah, it is still crazy to think about it because, like, obviously I've been covering Avatar, this entire 5 years, so to me it obviously doesn't feel like there's been like a absence of anything necessarily, like in the sense of like the fandom just being completely gone. But it is different. It is a very different sort of era, in that 5 years after the ending of Avatar in 2008, we were in the middle of Korra. And I think there's always that case of that, because there isn't the main aspect of the franchise, the animation. There's no new animated show on at the moment. There's definitely that sense of like, this is why the fandom isn't as active as it kind of could be. And especially because when it comes to, like, say, the comics, basically when Korra started, we had some of the best comics. Like, we led off with a really good comic in The Promise, then we got the best comic after that in The Search, and obviously the stuff that comes in like the post-Korra era has been still of a very high quality, but nothing has sort of matched quite The Search, and we're still waiting for them to hit those kind of bigger notes. And it's like, if you don't have a plan for a new series, why is there an almost like tendency to hold back on some of the stories? And like, why can't we reveal some of the stuff that you clearly have no plan to reveal in anything bigger than the comics? Why can't we just learn the canon couples and this obvious stuff that like we should be knowing about at this point? So these are the sort of things that I think about in a way when these anniversaries come up, more so than directly thinking about just like the last episode of Korra itself, which I'll get to discussing it as we go on here. But the first thing that comes to mind for me is just kind of like, what happened, like 5 years, what's happened in the last 5 years. I think about the history of the franchise, where it is right now, more so than just an episode or the ending of the season or whatever. So it's weird. Like, next year could be a really big year, but the fact that like we don't know yet what the new comics are, and I have this sort of fear that like it won't deliver on exactly what the big story that I think they need to do, especially on the Avatar side of things. Like, Ruins of the Empire is good, but again, the next Korra comic I think also has to do something big. Thankfully, almost as if, to make up to almost as if they're aware of the fact that, it's the 5-year anniversary of Korra, we're coming up to the 15-year anniversary of the premiere of Avatar, that's where this like novel idea came from. And the Rise of Kyoshi was such a huge thing this year, it almost felt like a third series. And if they can do more novels going forward, and if they can just include that little bit of art to get that bit of a visual stuff going on with it, it could really become something huge. So even though we don't have an animated series, I still think we can get to a point where we're delivering big content each year in the fandom, in the franchise. It's all about them delivering that and not just giving us something like imbalance where it doesn't feel particularly important. But yeah, it is the 55-year anniversary of the ending of this series, and that means the book four balance came to an end. We got that, final episodes, and what are my thoughts on that specifically? It's weird as well because whenever I think about the end of the Legend of Korra and my thoughts on like, oh, at the time back in 2014 December, what were my thoughts on the final episode? The first thing that comes to mind is just the Korrasami discussion, more than anything else that went on in the finale, and the show coming to an end, book four bringing the series to an end, this like end of the second series. The first thing I think about is just the fact that most of the discussion in the aftermath of the finale was focused around Korrasami, and the fact that one of the only times in like the entire series of Korra, Mike and Brian felt the need to put out like a post and make a statement about something that happened was Korrasami. You completely get why, in a way, this completely overshadowed like the ending of the show, as kind of sad in a way as that is. Like, this is what was happening at the time. Like, this was the discussion, and in a way, like, if not for me having like on record, the podcasts and the videos and stuff like that I did at the time, I wouldn't really remember much of what I said about the finale, because the main thing I remember is pretty much just that everyone was talking about Korrasami more so than anything else. And like, it is weird because like, obviously now Korrasami is sort of such a normal thing, like it's included so regularly in the Korra comics, and like it's been a thing for 5 years now. And like, I think much more people are behind it now that the comics have actually like covered it to a degree and given it some development. It still highlights, of course, that like at the time, in context of the time, it was obviously very out of nowhere. Like, it wasn't set up particularly well, and the reason there was such a discussion and kind of fervor around this more than anything else was because it was surprising and kind of shocking, and people were confused, and there were discussions and back and forths about, was it developed or was it not. Like, I still maintain it wasn't really developed. I think Mike and Brian's posts that they put up at the time made it pretty clear that they weren't aware of how much they could do, and they just assumed that they couldn't do that much. And then when they decided to actually do something, they realized actually they would have let us do more. So it's more of a kind of thing on them than I think anything on the fan base for like not seeing anything. So that's always where I kind of go to with that discussion, and it's sort of a non-event really now, because it is just part of the comics, and people are invested every time there is something with them. And that the most recent comic, Rings of the Empire Part 2, it got people sort of, worried for Korra and Asami, because Asami gets brainwashed, and Korra has to experience Asami saying all these things to her. And people got invested in that, even if it's, that's not the hugest thing, and they could use development elsewhere. The fact that people got invested in it, it tells you, that this relationship ultimately, worked, and people are behind it now. But yeah, the finale itself, like, you look back on it, and I think it delivers on so many moments. Like, of course, they bring the plot of book 4 to an end with the whole Kuvira stuff, which again is interesting to think about, given that the current comic is exploring kind of the threads directly left open by the end of book 4, and the fact that people are invested in Kuvira and want to see where they head with the character, and the stuff with Sue and Batar and so on, and how Korra sort of feels about, her similarity in a way to Kuvira. And it's good because they're picking up on that, and I thought they ended in general a lot of this stuff fairly well. Obviously, with my usual criticisms about the book 4 finale in play, of like there is a lot of sort of undeveloped setup for Kuvira to make a lot of that happen, which the comic is sort of exploring now, which is definitely good. But it was very much the case where a lot of the important stuff in book 4, I felt, did sort of happen off screen, in terms of the details surrounding the issues between Kuvira and Sue, and how exactly she left with Batar. That's what I'm hoping the third part of Ruins of the Empire really gets into. But in terms of like ending, they delivered on so much of it. Like in the finale, like the all the episodes of the finale, like the death of Hiroshi, big moment for Asami. the wedding of Julie and Varric that was really well set up over the course of book 4, and it allows you to have your big sort of celebration scene, but like all of the characters together because it is their wedding. You get to see most of the sort of couples together at the end, which, after some confusion and like drama with relationship stuff across like the first couple of books, they finally ended with actually a good amount of like decently set up relationships by the end, with Bark and Julie, Korra and Asami, just about gets there at the end. Opal and Bolin, Janora and Kai, these type of things, like they get there, and you just kind of hope that like one of the comics eventually gets around to covering, Mako and what relationship he has. Hopefully, when we go to the Fire Nation, we'll get to meet Izumi's daughter, and that relationship can start, if that is indeed something they still have in mind to do. But yeah, the like the ending for Korra especially, I did ultimately really like where they went, because she was our most developed character in the show, and ending on that note of like she's brought balance in so many ways, but she finally kind of for once kind of has realized that there's still so much more that she needs to do as the Avatar. Like, it's not done just because the Kuvira thing is temporarily dealt with. That she now realizes there's so many issues that she could, as the Avatar, be helping with, and it's like that finally that sense of like Korra, fully taking on that role of realizing that there's stuff she has to set out to do on her own, as well as just reacting to stuff that pops up. So it felt like the great setup for the human spirit conflict, that like this is her big thing. This is going to be her huge task as the Avatar, of trying to fix this issue that's been in place for so long. And that's where I was a bit frustrated with like Turf Wars and how it didn't really cover it that well, but hopefully we can get back to it and properly explore that into some degree. What else? I suppose just sort of, continuing on that note of just like the ending of the show, and the fact that it has been 5 years. How in general have people sort of viewed or accepted the show? I still do feel to a degree like the show doesn't get the respect it deserves. Avatar, like, 100% does. Everyone like who has seen Avatar is, like, respects it. Korra still, I think, has that slight sense from a good amount of people where it's just that other show that they kind of enjoy, but they sort of immediately dismiss as not being anywhere near as good as Avatar. In that, like, even I would say, like, look, ultimately, I think Avatar is the superior show to Korra, and I've done a lot of analysis videos on it. I'll link a more detailed one that I did in the description below. After the end of like a rewatch of both series, I did this one kind of finish ups kind of video to bringing it all together about why specifically in detail I think Avatar is a superior show to Korra. And it highlights that like it is still close. There are things that Korra does better than Avatar. There are things that Avatar does better than Korra. But the point is just that they both are absolutely worthy series in this franchise, and that I feel we are better off as Avatar fans now that we have Korra than without it. Especially when it comes to sort of the lore exploration, which was sort of the weaker part of Avatar. They finally solidified a lot of that in Korra. The fact that they were able to sort of deal with a couple of sort of darker, I think, issues along the way in Korra also is something that you can sort of get behind, and that, yeah, they had some pretty deep kind of stuff going on with some of the things they explored in like book 3, book 4, even some of the more kind of intense spiritual things in book 2. It was nice to have a slightly older team to be able to hit those notes with. It kind of felt like they knew their fan base had sort of grown up, so they gave them a little bit more, and that was sort of nice to see. But like you want the series obviously to be able to do both, and not feel that it has to be super dark just to deliver anything. But that's where I think Korra works. Like, I don't think it's inherently lacking anything like obvious that like Avatar has. I think it's just an element of just like Avatar is the more solid show overall. The structure of it allows it to, I think, overall go to some more interesting places. The larger amount of episodes per season definitely helped, in that some of the Korra books could have used a few more episodes, a little bit more development here or there. That the structure of the, like, more books but less episodes is an interesting concept, but you probably didn't need to go as extreme, like going from 20 to like 12, 13, 14. You probably needed to go to more like 20 to about like 16, 17. Then you would have given yourself that little bit of extra space and not feel like you're almost like at certain points like rushing towards an end. But still, like, there's so many great elements of Korra along the way, like especially on the villain front. Like Amon from book one, even Tarlok from book one was super well done. The impact of that mystery that ran throughout book one was incredible. The lore and exploration, the character development for Korra in book two, Janora stepping into the spotlight across book two as well. The spirituality stuff was really well done. Obviously, the intensity really comes into things in book three, with the Red Lotus being an excellent sort of physical opponent to go up against because they're so lethal and have such amazing bending. Obviously, like, again, they needed more development, but they filled that role that, like, you can get behind. You remember what the Red Lotus did. And then going into book four with a more sort of complicated thing of, like, the aftermath of book three, who stabilizes things with Korra injured like that, and Kuvira steps into the spotlight having met her before, and Korra's comeback, and again the development in book four, when Korra didn't get a lot of development in book three, but she really gets to do a lot in book four, and I think it just ends really, really nicely. Is it perfect? No. Is Avatar perfect? No. As I said, I still think Avatar is the more solid show, but it's closer than you think. I still think people are a little bit too dismissive in some ways to Korra, and maybe have a bit too much sort of like nostalgic reverence for Avatar, that it's always going to be that childhood show to them, and they can never view it like kind of in a way objectively, and so it always kind of colors their view of this. But I appreciated my experience in both, and there's elements of Korra that I think are just absolutely fantastic, and that my favorite episodes of Avatar overall are from Korra with beginnings. And I'll absolutely agree to that. But at the same time, the worst overall episode of Avatar is in Korra as well, with remembrances. So it has that kind of both sides to it, and I think that's the main thing to say about it. And it's interesting because, like, I think, like, was it last year I did the rewatch and all that sort of stuff. It was great to kind of go back to it and, like, watch it again. And anytime I need to do, like, research for, like, certain videos, I need to go over scenes again. It's always great to watch so many of those episodes, especially, like, the key moments, because they do it so well. Like, it's so well animated, and, like, at times the writing is just really, really good. So it's always one of those things where, like, when these anniversaries come around, I always feel the need to be like, the Korra was really, really good. Like, let's not just be like, oh, it's the 5-year anniversary of Korra, like, oh yeah, the show that wasn't as good as Avatar. No, it's the 5-year anniversary of this great show that was Korra, that was a cool sequel to Avatar. It had its own kind of story to it. It carved out its own path while still referencing in many ways, being respectful to what came before. And in a way, like, with Star Wars on everyone's mind right now, it's a good example of sort of being respectful to the past while also developing new characters, and not necessarily feeling like you have just completely, like, stepped on the legacy of what came before. In that, like, I think Toph is a very good example of that, in that she is very different. She's very changed as we meet her in Korra compared to what we know of her before, and that where did this spirituality come from? There's definitely that sense of just the time, her life up to now has, like, just taken this toll in a way, but there's still that core of it's her. When Korra comes around, she gets that sort of Toph energy back and starts, messing around with the Avatar like old times, and you see more of classic Toph come out while it's still being older, more experienced, wiser Toph, spiritual Toph, and like all that stuff just kind of works, and it's like that's how you do it. That is how you do it. You don't do it like Luke Skywalker in Episode 8, and then have 9 need to do what it needs to do to kind of get it back on track, and just it feels so messy. Here it worked. Now I know a lot of people probably would have been like really happy if they had just had almost like the older characters be like the main plot and not allow the new characters to really step out, but you needed to have the new characters deliver. I think the extra material of like the comics and books is the place to tell these other stories of like the characters when they're older. It's just, when are the comics actually going to do that? Like, I understand the want for that sort of stuff. I've been asking for it for years, for the comics to just either in a separate like series of comics or to just time skip ahead to those moments. The Avatar comics need to cover some of that ground, cover the characters at interesting time periods, because whenever there's any new piece of like official art or new official piece of information about the characters when they're older, everyone freaks out. Everyone wants to know about it, and I'm just shocked that they haven't delivered on any of that really. Like the excitement back in book 1, where we got that flashback sequence to what with Yukon, and we got to see Aang, Toph, Sokka, the way they teased that and then finally delivered on it, was so cool to see. In that, like, tell us a story, like an actual story where we get to see all those characters, a full story, not just a flashback that links into like present day Korra. No, just show us some of that stuff. That's what everyone really wants. So I always respect Korra for the way it did all of that, in terms of like Zuko, the way he was later introduced, and you can see that okay, he's developed into a wiser character, in that they don't just have him be like Iroh 2.0, and that it's still Zuko, but he has his own like type of wisdom to him while also being different than his uncle. So that was stuff like that is where I think they really got it right, of not just having the characters just be sort of echoes of before, just being these kind of mirror images of like the other characters who define them in some ways. But I think that's where I'm roughly gonna to end the video here. The 5-year anniversary, it's always cool. Like, ultimately, like, there's an anniversary every year. Like, the 5-year one, does it have that much meaning? I'm not sure, but it is still kind of just cool to like be like, whoa, it has been 5 years since this show came to an end, and especially me as like a content creator, where like running the site Avatar: The Last Airbender online, this channel that I have every single like thought of mine like ever about Korra on this channel or on the podcast feed, and it's incredible to kind of think that like these last 5 years, it's kind of like all cataloged there, like everything that kind of has happened within the fandom, because I cover news and discuss it. Like, all of my thoughts are out there about the full run of Korra and all the stuff in the aftermath. And that's like another aspect to all of this as well, is just like, yeah, here's all this like fan content, as well as just the show itself, kind of, I suppose, aging over time. So yeah, the main thing going forward, like, obviously, is that like I do hope that like 2020 delivers, we get our big content, and we can finally get back to it feeling like the fandom is that bit more active again. And I think it really is all on the story content and them delivering the big content that they need to, because I think once you tell important stories, the fandom will be there for it, I think, kind of regardless of what medium you tell it in. And it's going to be so interesting to see how this live action show goes. You guys know that I'm not particularly invested in it, because it's not telling anything new, and I think it's a kind of very superfluous kind of project that's going on, and I don't know how much benefit there's going to be, even if it is a good series, just because it is the same thing. And then the continuity issues of like, what on earth way are we meant to view it? I'm so confused about it, but at least it's a big project and it could lead to something. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the 5-year anniversary of the ending of the Legend of Korra. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.